the idea that comp can help drive this behavior between, the techs and the salespeople. The idea of maybe making spiffs out of it or gamify that behavior. It was interesting what you said in your own experience with mission critical tickets compared to not mission critical tickets, and not necessarily holding hostage that mission critical ticket, because then you probably blew the upsell anyway out of resenting you holding back that ticket. But for that softer stuff, yeah, I think that was spot on.
Yeah, it's funny because that is where the real opportunity lies, I think, is like in those collection, because then you have quantity of issues that each individual one of them can be swept under the rug. And it takes somebody to then now view those at like a bird's eye view to say like, yeah, we need to do something about this. And so while you have those like kind of retrospective trends to look at, maybe in like a quarterly business review or something like that, why not get it right at the point of impact? You know what I mean?
I do.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is like, obviously the article is all about escalating these level 1 tickets into upsell opportunities. So, at Viper, you being an expert in this product space of, endpoint protection and things like that. So if I'm going to sell that, what are the types of issues maybe that I should look for?
Yeah, from my perspective, coming from Viper and really thinking about endpoint and email and all the different services within those two basic platforms, and how it would relate to the level 1 help desk. And so what I mean by that is, first of all, if you have to be aware that there's an upsell possibility there within your software. Once you're kind of aware of that, then it's how to execute. But the awareness part, for example, would be like web access control or DNS filtering within an endpoint that can correlate tickets with what would have been that additional service. So if it's something that could have been restricted with web access control, or something to do with the breach coming back to something that a DNS could have looked up, those are a couple additional services that in the same fashion, an email security suite would also have that same upsell opportunity that you and I talked about. That phishing email would be the perfect example to actually dive into the suite of products within email security, like anti-phishing or attachment protection.
Is there like an upsell chain with these products? Do you see, like, is it easier to sell one, and then maybe once they're in that one product, maybe the next one's, is there a path for this?
There is a path, and it is a land and expand strategy that Viper has as a vendor, the same as MSP have out to their clients, I would think. And, so within the tool, there are these different services, but you still have to start with the basics of each tool. So you would need the basics of email security, and you would need the basics of the endpoint security platform. And then we make aware to our partners that there's all of these suite of products within. And then you can kind of logically add on in those areas that would make the biggest impact. And right now, I think that's proven to be the email space.
So if you were like a fly on a wall at an MSP, and you had one opportunity to like buzz in somebody's ear and say like, pitch Viper right now, like what would that situation look like?
Well, I think it would be around, the email space, the phishing space, or business email compromise. And given that really maps well to a couple of products that Viper offers, which is the email security advanced threat protection, which has the anti-phishing, and it has the attachment protection. And so a lot of the help desk questions come from that arena. Is this safe? Is this a bad link, et cetera? And then for those same questions, was this a shady email? That also begs to the security awareness training angle. And that's also something that Viper has. So for myself, if I kind of correlate this into Viper and make this analogous to my support organization, seeing these very same opportunities that the MSPs helped us see. And it's really the same kind of strategy to get each organization to engage, to drive that behavior of introducing and possibly adding on these additional products.
Yeah, I think that, and at least for us, it was always about context, because when you can sell something or you could pitch something, but if you don't have that concrete like context right there in front of you to be able to say like, here's an issue, here's how it could have been prevented. If you're just kind of speculating based on these kind of talk tracks of like, oh, the industry is trending in this way and these are threats that but if you've just gotten hacked or if you've just received these kind of emails, then it's just such a stronger case to sell.
Yeah, it sure is. And I know that a lot of MSPs are smiling with that same kind of wry grin to say, I told you about this on the front end. I really did. I told you to make sure to, protect XYZ. And oftentimes to the best intentions, the end user or the clients still won't, kind of go for that service. And to your point, and it's a really valid point, it only takes getting burnt or having that, actual need for remediation or something like that to, kind of say, well, humbly, you were right. And, let's move on from here.
Yeah, and like I'm always, as like an MSP content guy, I'm always talking about, content, content, content. It's what we're doing right now. But, like think about if you had this content in your hand in the form of a ticket that you could just then, go and pitch somebody with. And then even better is like you could then turn that into like a case study or something like that once you have that successful upsell to then present to somebody else that didn't have to get burned to learn.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Some of the things that happen to others. A case study, boy, that's a good example, isn't it? To kind of harvest some of that data. It comes down to both our level 1 support technicians and in any kind of level 1 help desk scenario. Those are really the boots on the ground, the very immediate feedback when there is trouble and people are desperate. And so they're going to be that first line of not only their lifeline, their life preserver, if you will, but to your point, there's some revenue opportunities that can be uncovered here. I think the trick has always been, at least in my experience, is how do we properly incent that technician who's really a quote unquote job, it isn't his job or her job to upsell like the salesperson would. But at the same time, they are the front lines like we're talking about. So how can we grease the skids, if you will? And, we talk a little bit about incentives and way to, maybe use spiffs or use some other way, gamification or some other way to make sure that those get passed on. What are your thoughts there about, the two different birds of a feather there, the technician and the salesperson?
So I think that it's a very natural progression. So like when let's say a young MSP where the owner is very involved in both sides, the sales process and in the help desk. And so what happens is like they're used to this, where like they're on the front line anyway, and so they're able to gobble up these opportunities as they come up. But then the business matures, and then that line gets drawn, right? And so let's say the owner now maybe is still doing sales, but they're not on the front line anymore, and so they need to figure out a way to kind of like map this, back to them so that they can actually now benefit from it. And it took us a little bit of time to realize this. And we did offer commissions for technicians that wanted to sell and that like were comfortable with it. But it wasn't for everybody. There was some technicians that really would rather just escalate the ticket and go. But it was actually a great way to evaluate them too, because what actually ended up happening is we were able to promote people into these different roles because of how they handled these type of situations. And it's not to say that we didn't reward others for just escalating and being like ticket closers. You know what I mean? Because that's an important job too. But it was an interesting way to kind of get a feel for kind of the guys that we had, guys and girls that we had, and what they were capable of doing.
Yeah, that is interesting. It kind of reminds me of almost pseudo career pathing, to see if there's some kind of an affinity for selling. And sometimes that is uncovered in folks that, you chalked up as just being technical. I see it in my world with SEs quite often because they're the closest thing to being that kind of split of technician and salesperson, that really rare breed. So yeah, you make a really good point. I think that the takeaway, no matter which way you slice it, is uncovering the need and understanding and having the awareness that that need exists and how to capitalize, from a revenue standpoint or a relationship standpoint that will lead to likely more revenue. How do you capitalize on that? So whether it's you let that technician who, like you said, might have an affinity to try to sell, give that person the opportunity to do that, or if you use some other means, some sort of automation back to your quote unquote normal sales folks, the normal bullpen there, that would love that lead as well. So either way you slice it, I think it starts with the awareness and then the ability to capitalize.